Hey everyone. Imagine standing at a crossroads. One path leads to instant gratification, the other to long-term fulfillment. Which would you choose? The Israelites in Numbers chapter 11 verse 1. 35 faced a similar dilemma. Their cravings led them to demand meat, rejecting the manna God provided. The result? A plague that struck them down. Cravings, when unchecked, can destroy futures. Whether it's unhealthy habits, toxic relationships, impulsive financial decisions, or even the way we consume information, our desires shape our destiny. Inspired by the 7 pillars of wisdom. A missing ingredient, this message calls us to discipline our cravings to build a sustainable future. The Israelites longed for the food of Egypt, forgetting the slavery that came with it. How often do we romanticize past comforts while ignoring their consequences? Think about parenting. Giving in to a child's every demand may bring peace today, but could foster entitlement tomorrow. Or health decisions. Junk food satisfies now, but chronic illness lurks in the future. Skipping learning opportunities for entertainment? It may feel good now, but it limits future success. The Israelites' cravings blinded them to the bigger picture. What cravings are blinding you? Discipline is the bridge between desire and destiny. The book, The 7 Pillars of Wisdom, emphasizes wisdom as the foundation for long-term success. Surrounding yourself with wise mentors leads to growth, while associating with negative influences leads to stagnation. Every choice today is a seed for tomorrow. Are you planning wisely? Moses, overwhelmed by the people's complaints, sought God's wisdom. Instead of reacting emotionally, he leaned on divine guidance. What if we did the same? Numbers chapter 11 verse 33 states, "While the meat was still between their teeth, the anger of the Lord burned against them, and he struck them with a severe plague." Their craving led to their downfall. What starts as a harmless indulgence can spiral into destruction. Staying in unhealthy spaces for comfort can cost you your peace and future. Feeding on negativity shapes your mindset and decisions. Unchecked cravings don't just affect today, they shape your legacy. Wisdom calls us to think beyond the moment. Proverbs 9:10 reminds us, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom." Pause before acting. Ask, will this decision benefit my future? Seek counsel. Surround yourself with voices that challenge and uplift. Embrace delayed gratification. The best things in life require patience. Cravings aren't inherently bad, but when they control us, they kill our potential. The Israelite story warns us, what we desire today can shape or destroy our tomorrow. What cravings do you need to discipline today? Your future depends on it. This video is the intellectual property of Jacqueline Enterprise Inc. Go to Amazon.com and pick up your copy of the 7 Pillars of Wisdom, a missing ingredient today. Thanks for watching. Stay disciplined, stay blessed.
I'm so thankful that you were able to watch that with me. It's really important that we understand that cravings can kill. Now, I promised you that when we came back that we were going to talk more about the danger of short-term thinking, the power of discipline, the consequences of unchecked cravings, choosing wisdom over cravings. So we're going to jump right into that because cravings can kill. The first question you want to ask yourself is, what is the force behind the craving? What's the spirit that's driving the craving? Well, what we learned in the previous session is that in Numbers chapter 11, verse 4, the spirit of riffraff, the mixed multitude, those people who were double-minded, who weren't rooted and grounded in the great I am, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They weren't rooted and grounded in their allegiance to God, but they were in the midst of the Israelite camp, encamped in various places, perpetuating the mindset of anxiousness and agitation. They created agitation in the camp so that they began to complain and murmur against God. What's the spirit that's driving your craving? And what is its end goal? What's the purpose? The purpose there was to destroy the Israelite people so that they would never make it. See, there are some spirits in the midst of you. They're hosted by individuals who would be considered riffraff in your life. They're a mixed multitude. They have not been assigned or called as you have been called. God has a purpose for everyone that exists. In your life, he has a divine purpose. Their job, or the spirit within them, has a job. And that job is to prevent you from reaching your destiny. They already know they're not going to make it to your destiny with you. But their job is to prevent you from getting there. It is the spirit of riffraff. That spirit is a multitude. It's a spirit that gathers together, collects together various mindsets to obstruct your focus. What's the spirit that's driving your craving? When cravings can kill. So let's take a look at this now. We're going to look at more in Numbers chapter 11. When we talk about the danger of short-term thinking, the Israelites, again, were longing for the food of Israel, but they're forgetting about the slavery that came with it. So how often do we romanticize past comforts and the different comforts of our past while totally ignoring the consequences? So how many times have you longed to be back with that boyfriend or that girlfriend or that significant other for the comforts of just not being lonely while you totally ignored the obnoxious treatment that they applied towards you? How many times have you romanticized going back to a church that you were familiar with just because you were familiar with it, ignoring the fact that they only tolerated you, but they never celebrated you? How many times do we romanticize comforts? We can remember the comforts. They can remember the comfort of the meat, but they forgot all about the consequences of the enslavement. When we're talking about parenting and looking at short-term thinking rather than long-term thinking, and again, we've already talked about the inspiration for this session is the book, 7 Pillars of Wisdom, a missing ingredient. We talked about previously that in chapter 2, there's a whole composite of how we're wonderfully and fearfully made in our neurology and our anatomy, and how the word of God speaks to that and empowering us to overcome certain cravings that are not the calling of God for our life, or not conducive to the calling of God for our life. Where later in this book, it talks about long-term thinking, how the book of Proverbs teaches us that wisdom empowers us to think more on a long-term basis, empowering us with a deeper foundation, a foundation that will sustain our growth in life. When we're talking about parenting, Giving in to our children sometimes and all of their every demand may foster peace at the time. But what's happening is that in the future, it may be enabling an attitude of entitlement in them, which would create problems for them, close doors for them, literally be a craving that could kill. When we're making health decisions like certain foods that satisfy us, that comfort foods, they may not necessarily be healthy foods for us, but they comfort us. But in the long term, they could create a chronic illness that kind of lurks about in our future, waiting to ambush us. And so when we talk about investing in our time and our education, when we start skipping learning opportunities for entertainment, that might feel good now. But when you're trying to pass that class, or where you're trying to reach a certain goal financially, or you're trying to reach a certain stature in the position that you carry in your job, it can limit your future success. If you're trying to reach a certain acclamation in your business, in your company, it could limit your future success. When we're talking about instant sexual gratification, acting impulsively for 5 or 10, possibly 15 or 20 minutes of pleasure, in those relationships that have no foundation, it can lead to an emotional detachment. It can lead to spiritual entrapment, broken trust, unintended consequences like unplanned pregnancies or sexually transmitted infections, or again, the worst of all, sexual, spiritual entrapment. That's a whole nother level. And that's a whole nother teaching that you need to know about, because it can affect the rest of your life and the lives of your offsprings. Israelites' cravings blinded them to the bigger picture. Firstly, they didn't understand the spirit of the riffraff that was driving the cravings. They didn't understand what was programming their neurology. They were just being driven thoughtlessly. What cravings are blinding you right now? Ask yourself. Ask the Holy Spirit to reveal to you what cravings are driving you. Sometimes they can be subtle. These cravings in them were subtle to them, but it was affecting and influencing their behavior, their conversations, their vehement complaints, which turned out to be complaints against God. Who else is being affected by your cravings? Is it causing you to dishonor God without being aware of it consciously? Let's talk about the power of discipline. Discipline is a bridge between desire and destiny. In this book, The 7 Pillars of Wisdom, a Missing Ingredients, there's emphasis on how wisdom is the foundation for long-term success. She'll set you up to make strategic plans and steps towards building the foundation that's going to sustain your future. People networking and your net worth depends on you surrounding yourself with mentors that will lead to growth. Associating with negative influences is going to lead to your stagnation. But first, you have to recognize the negative influence. This children of Israel didn't recognize that the spirit of riffraff was operating in that mixed multitude. They understood that they were slightly different and didn't believe the way that they believed. But what they hadn't understood is that riffraff had never been intended to get to where they were going. They were not intended to get to the promised land. Their job was to prevent the Israelites from reaching the promised land. See, just because you escape certain circumstances and situations doesn't mean there's not a spirit of riffraff that's attached to you to still prevent you from getting where you're going. So yeah, you escaped the bad background. Yeah, you escaped the sickness. You escape the disease. You escape the addiction. You escape the gang and the gang violence. You escape the neighborhood that was just infiltrated with violence. You escape the sexual abuse. You escape the physical abuse. But there is a spirit of riffraff that is in the midst of your audience, in the midst of your surroundings. And the job of that spirit is still to prevent you from reaching your divine destiny. So as you are celebrating your deliverance and your freedom, you need to always be consciously aware of the Spirit of God and wisdom and understanding and knowledge, staying sober and vigilant so that you can hear what the Spirit of God is saying and you can keep your mind stayed on your divine purpose. And to do that, you've got to continue to hear from the Spirit of divinity that dwells within you. Christ in you, the hope of glory. And to do that, you have to set your mind on things above. See, when they began to complain, they started to distort their perception. They started to distort the vibrational resonance that's surrounding them. And then the spirit of riffraff just kept driving them. So it intensified and became more and more intense until God retaliated from within them, attracting to them destruction. What's happening in your life? How are you releasing yourself from being under the power of discipline, the authority of discipline in your life? When you look at associating with negative influences that lead to stagnation, understand that there is a purpose to that spirit that is driving that force. And it is they know they're not going to reach their divine destiny because they don't have one. Not divine. They have a destiny. But the spirit that's operating within them is leading them to destruction. And that spirit wants to take you as well to prevent you from reaching your goal or the goal of God for your life. When we look at our return on life's investments, every choice that we make today is a seed for tomorrow. Are you planting wisely? Because I'm telling you, God's grace is compassionate and it's loving and it's long-suffering. But what God's grace will not do for you is change your past. When you make a decision, God's grace will be with you every step of the way through that decision, transforming and making things as well for you as possible in the middle of your decision. But what grace will not do for you is change the decision that you made. Now, grace will empower you with a desire. Grace will empower you with a desire. Grace will empower you with a desire to be in the presence of God. But grace will not change your decision. Even in a bad decision, grace will help you to overcome circumstances and situations. But will that have a consequence on your divine destiny? Yes. There are some decisions we can make that can alter our divine destiny. Will grace leave us? No. Will mercy leave us? No. They'll be with us every step of the way in the middle of the decision that we made. Grace and mercy will honor our decision, still upholding us with the love and the compassion of God. But there will be consequences. So as we talk about the power of discipline and the return on life's investment, remind yourself every choice today is a seed for tomorrow. And ask yourself, am I planting wisely? When we talk about delayed gratification, even in relationships, we want to build emotional intimacy before we get involved with physical intimacy. Because physical intimacy is going to foster a deeper type of connection. We're talking about that spiritual entanglement. So we want to build first emotional intimacy. We want to build in such a way that we will have a long-term sustainable relationship that's not just a physical one. Still talking about delayed gratification. Moses was overwhelmed by the people's complaints. But what did he do? He sought God's wisdom. He didn't act impulsively. He didn't try to get instant gratification by cursing them out or returning their fire with fire. What he did was he went to God and he says, listen, I can't sustain this. This is overwhelming. He reached out for help through God's divine guidance. What about if we would do the same thing to overcome our cravings? What if we would seek out God, asking him for the emotional help that we need to overcome the spirit that's driving the craving? There's a spirit that's driving this craving that seeks to hinder you from your divine destiny. Ask God, the source of this spirit. Ask him to sustain you and give you the emotional strength that you need to overcome. It's not just emotional strength. It's a neurological strength. It's a biological strength. It's a biochemistry that you'll need to overcome this. But he can lead, guide, and direct you as to the direction that you need to go. Because all of us are wonderfully and fearfully made in various ways. So if I told you what I did to overcome, it wouldn't help you. But Moses went to God and he asked God to help him in this situation where he could not sustain the overwhelming complaints of these people. Emotionally, it was too heavy for him. Go to God and begin to talk to him about how emotionally but first you've got to ask him if there is a craving in your life that's detrimental to you, because you may not be able to see it. They couldn't see that spirit of riffraff was driving them to complain. They really thought that was their own idea. They didn't know that there was a mixed multitude that was implanted there to prevent them from reaching their destiny. You may not be cognizant of the force that's there, that's hindering you, that's creating and driving this craving that wants to kill your destiny. As we look at the consequence of unchecked cravings, in Numbers chapter 11, verse 33, it states that while the meat was still between their teeth, the anger of the Lord burned against them, and he struck them with severe plague. Now, let's talk about this just for a moment. That's when that craving led to their downfall. Okay? The whole design of that spirit of riffraff, that mixed multitude, was to prevent them. Yeah, they got out of slavery, but the whole goal was to allow riffraff, that spirit of riffraff, to attach to them as they were coming out of their bondage, so they would never reach into their divine destiny. I'm telling you, Satan wants you to be lulled to sleep. He wants you to think, okay, it's over now. I made it out of that destruction. I made it out of that captivity. I made it, and so I don't have to worry about it. And yet there is a subtle spirit of riffraff still attached to hinder you from your divine destiny. And it's driving certain cravings in you to prevent you from moving forward. Even the craving to be lax, to do nothing. That's a craving. And it's a craving that will hinder you from moving forward. When we talk about vices, addictions, they may start as a harmless indulgence every once in a while, and then it can start to spiral into your destruction, because once you hit that certain place in your brain, that neurochemistry in your brain, and there is a path that's ingrained, it becomes deeper and deeper in its ingrainment, in its pathway, as you continue to indulge. When we're looking at toxic environments, staying in unhealthy spaces for comfort, it can cost you your peace and your future. When we're looking at certain programming, certain media that we consume, we're feeding on negative mindsets and perceptions and vibrational resonance that will shape our perspective and our decisions. Impulsive sexual decisions. can lead to long-term dissatisfaction and emotional instability, even mental health struggles. There have been studies that show that impulsive sexual behavior can create disorders in our thought patterns, long term, things that we now are unable to overcome. When we're talking about unchecked cravings, they don't just affect us today, and they don't just affect you. They affect others around you because they transform your perspective, and you may not even understand that it's happening, but it shapes the way that you make decisions, and it will shape your destiny. Lastly, we talk about choosing wisdom over cravings. Wisdom calls for us to think beyond the moment. Proverbs 9:10 reminds us the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. So what we want to do, just like you'll read in instructions in this book that give you step-by-step fundamental ways to apply God's spirit and wisdom, understanding, and knowledge to overcome the very fundamental basis of your cravings, is you want to pause before you act. You want to ask God before you act on anything. Ask God, will this decision benefit my future? Seek counsel. Surround yourself with voices that challenge and uplift you. Embrace delayed gratification. A good pause is always good. It's always wisdom. The best thing in life is going to require patience. All of the best things in life require patience, cultivation, building of a foundation, so that the height of your growth can be excessive. The deeper the foundation, the higher you can rise, the further you can go. So I want you to remember, harness your cravings for a greater future. Cravings aren't inherently bad. No, they can be good. But when they control us, they can kill our potential. So see, the Israelites in this story, it's warning us that we desire certain things today that can shape and destroy our tomorrow, because there's a force that's driving the craving. So what cravings do you need to discipline today? I'm asking you, because your future in some situations can depend on it. It's just that serious. It's just that serious. And we'll always have grace, and we'll always have mercy, and they'll always help us to overcome. But there'll always be the residue of the consequence that came from the cravings that kill. So as I get ready to close, I want to remind you, cravings can kill. What are you craving today? I'm Jacqueline Battle, and I'm reminding you, God loves you, and I'm praying for you. Blessings.